This is on the importance of the family life and the origins of the family life. So, marriage in ancient times was not so much based on love. To have married the person that you love is, in actuality, a more of a recent uh, exploration into the marriage concept. But in ancient cultures, marriage was a matter of a right of succession, as it was through marriage, through the first wife or the legal wife, that inheritance would be passed on, and this progeny, through the first wife and legal wife, would be able to inherit the the property and the inheritance passed from the father. In modern times, it became a matter of love to marry somebody that you love. And in the ancient culture, the purpose too of a marriage, from the spiritual perspective, was the establishment of the household. And it was through the legal wife that a household, which is the basis of the mother culture, that children, sons, offspring would be generated. That the foundation of the household, which all other systems are based on, has its foundation in the family structure. Now, in the dharmic paths, which they call the ashrams, there are four modes of life, four ashrams of studentship: the brahmacharya mode, the grihasya, this is the householder mode of life. You have the vanaprasya, learning from nature, renunciation. And you have the sannyasin, the complete renunciate. But all the modes of life have their origin or foundation based on the householder mode. Because no priest, no Brahmin, no sage, no shaman, no warrior, no merchant, no servant is born without there being the basis of the family structure. Now, husband and wife, they've come together out of union for the creation of that, the creation of the family. In the ancient Aryan cultures, wives were considered as property, as it was through the wife that one would have their property of children and a household. It became the sole heir of the male. In this day and age, not so anymore, as women have been afforded equal rights and they stand on equal ground, co-creating together in equal household, where the lordship over the house is equally distributed on both husband and wife. The succession of inheritance was passed down through the firstborn son. This is ancient Nodite culture, the culture of the ancient Aryans, which the remains existed in the Sumerian culture. It was carried through Sumerian culture. And this is where we get from Abraham, who carried this lineage. His father, Terah, was a priest in Ur of the Chaldeans, of the first region of Mesopotamia. And Abraham, as a descendant of this lineage of Ur, which holds those characteristics of this Nadite Aryan culture, and goes to Haran, then south to uh, the Canaanite region, where he meets the high priest Melchizedek, then receives the blessing and initiation into the order of Melchizedek. Through simple faith, one is granted the blessing of grace. The enemies will be delivered into his hands, and his generation, his seed, will spread to the ends of the earth. This is the blessing. Succession, even in Abraham's lineage, we see this culture, and it's holding the purity of this Nadite culture. Abraham's son Isaac, even though he's not the firstborn, Ishmael is the firstborn, but Isaac, who is the legal inheritant from his legal wife Sarah, receives the inheritance. The firstborn Ishmael comes from Ishmael's maidservant Hagar. So even though Ishmael was the firstborn, Abraham's legal wife Sarah gave forth a son who became the legal heir. We see that same story repeated again. So Isaac's children, you now have Jacob and Esau. Esau is the firstborn, but he gives up his legal right for a plate of food or comfort, the security of life. Just give me a good plate of food and I'll be satisfied. He gives up his legal right to the inheritance to Jacob. Even though Jacob not being the firstborn, he becomes the legal heir who receives the inheritance of this blessing from the Melchizedek order. Another area where we see the same pattern, laying on the origins of the firstborn in the family structure, the legal wife, is in the Sumerian culture, which is the remains of the Nadite Aryans. They have two regions of the earth, ancient Egypt and Mesopotamia. These were said to be two brothers in two various clans, symbolized by the eagle and the serpent. Mesopotamia had the symbol of the eagle, and ancient Egypt, Hem, had the symbol of the serpent. Enki, which means Lord of the Earth, was given command over ancient Egypt of the lower world, called the Absu. Enlil, which means Lord of the Command, is given lordship over the settlements in Mesopotamia. And even though Enki, being the firstborn, was born from a concubine of Anu, his heavenly father, while Enlil, Lord of the Command of Mesopotamia, was born from Anu's legal wife, a half-sister from the same father. And so Enlil, who's the heir of Mesopotamia, becomes the legal heir in the inheritance, while Enki doesn't receive that inheritance because he doesn't hold the title of succession, because he's not the legal heir, being born from a concubine. Exact same thing that happened with Isaac and his brother Ishmael. So this same pattern we see being repeated out, and this culture carries it forward. Wherever we see nobility and we see these royal noble classes, they carry these same practices for the purpose of the family structure and marriage. Marriage being the cultural inheritance of these Aryan cultures for the purpose of succession. Now, men could have concubines, and there was no shame on a man having a concubine, but the concubine would not have become the legal wife. The legal wife reserved a separate status, separate from the concubines or the harem, because the legal heir, the first wife, and how he raises the children in the household, they would receive the inheritance. So that's the ancient culture of the Aryans practiced in a nutshell, how we carried on that nobility and those practices through the Aryan culture, which we'll explore.